A while back, I was struggling to find a game to play, so I decided to ask a friend if he had any recommendations on games that he thought were good. He responded by pointing me to a small game called Firewatch. Firewatch was produced by Campo Santo, and they published the game alongside Untitled Goose Game developers Panic Inc. And looking at its Steam page, I was intrigued. The game looked good, and the description was intriguing. Now, after playing the game, I can say that it's indeed a good game. And it pains me to say that it's only good, because Firewatch could have been one of the greatest games of all time, but has a massive flaw within it that affects almost every aspect of the game. What that flaw is, we'll get into later. Now, I want to state that these are all my opinions, and if you disagree with them, that is completely okay. You're totally allowed to do so. I'm here to share my opinions and review the package that comes with Firewatch. With all this out of the way, let's take a deep dive into Firewatch and its fatal flaw. When judging a game, the biggest thing for me personally is gameplay. It's quite honestly the most important thing when it comes to how I enjoy a game. Video games are an interactive medium, and the interactive part of them needs to be good. So, how does Firewatch perform? With all honesty, it nails its gameplay loop. The game is essentially nothing more than a walking simulator, yes, but it still manages to be incredibly fun. The devs did this by not making the map gigantic, but instead making it a decent size, so that way the player wouldn't get overwhelmed and spend an hour going to one location with the slow movement speed. They also make sure that you only go to one location once. That way the game doesn't get repetitive. This does come at the cost of replayability though. The game also helps to prevent the player from being bored by giving them dialogue choices between the main characters Henry and his boss Delilah, and some of these are genuinely hysterical. I'll play a few of my favorites now.
What about shitty boss is gonna get me killed Hill?
Oh, is that Absorka Indian? Maybe Creek?
That's actually English for not in my job description. Hey.
What the hell's wrong with you?
My shitty boss almost got me killed.
First, your boss is a delight. Secondly, I didn't want to say anything.
No, it's fine. I'll just chuck my walkie-talkie into the river.
Oh, come on.
And you'll never hear from me again.
Finally, peace and quiet. Woohoo!
So...
Isn't your radio supposed to be in the river?
I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Well, I guess I'm stuck with you then.
Yeah.
The gameplay also plays a big part in the story, with Henry getting the tools for him to navigate the forest to discover things important to said story. And the voice actors are genuinely amazing. The game feels great to control, and there was never a moment where I was fighting against the game to play it. It's also incredibly polished. I didn't find a single bug while playing, and I've had a hard time finding one on the internet. But its gameplay loop isn't perfect. The game has little to no replayability, and for me, that's very important to the games I play. And I honestly don't see myself playing it again. Not for a while. Every area only has one thing to do in the world, and there are no huge secrets or Easter eggs to be discovered throughout the world. After you go to one area, it seems as though the game doesn't want you to go back. You've seen everything there is to see in that area. The gameplay is also structured in a way that feels very limiting and linear, and it doesn't promote exploration at all. There's nothing worth going off the path the game sets for the player in each part of the game, and this is enforced by each area only really getting one big chance to shine. You never go back to some of the areas in the game after you go to them once. Another big thing are the cache boxes. Throughout the map there are these boxes, and they are legitimately useless. In any other open world game, something like this would be used to provide the player with strengthening items. But in Firewatch, the most you'll get is updates to your map, and that's it. And it makes sense for balancing reasons, as the game literally hands you the code to all of them in one dialogue option at the very beginning, and the code is the same for every box, no matter what. Except one example, but that's important to the story, and the game also feeds you that example. And even if you forgot, the code is 1234. It is like the worst passcode ever.
Probably need a rope rope to get down the shale between you and the lake, if I remember right. There should be one in the supply box on the way. The code is 1234. It's actually that for all of them.
Secure.
Shut up.
I personally think it would have been better had they made some actual useful items in the caches and made them like little puzzles to solve, sort of like the geocaches you'll see out and about in the real world that some people have devoted themselves to finding. The final gripe I have with the gameplay loop, and is probably one of the most important cons for this gameplay loop, is the fact the game gives you dialogue choices and choices to branch the story into different paths, but every path and every choice leads to the same ending. I mean, the game literally opens with a slideshow presentation of choices for the player to make, but these choices never come back to matter. All they do is change some lines of dialogue in the game, and they never go on to give the player any real consequences, when these choices could have haunted the player for the rest of their playthrough. A game's soundtrack and visuals are key in presenting the game and having an enjoyable time with it. How does Firewatch stack up here? Well, really well. I never had any issues with the graphical quality of the game, and the soundtrack was absolutely phenomenal. When it comes to Firewatch's visuals, they're very pretty, yet stylized. It hits the point where the graphics aren't lifelike at all, but they're still incredibly beautiful to look at. Throughout my entire time with the game, I never found myself bored with looking at the scenery around the world. The forest was gorgeous 24/7. But as you progress further in the game, the forest slowly becomes engulfed in smoke. This smoke is created by a big fire that breaks out later in the game's story, causing the setting to become darker, more chaotic, harder to see with smog everywhere. This is an absolutely genius move on the developer's part, as it helps to reinforce the darker tone and the chaos that the story delves into when it comes into the game's later half of it. We'll get into that. The soundtrack, as mentioned, is phenomenal and sounds amazing. But what I love about it is it's saved for truly important moments. That way, it doesn't overpower the dialogue of the characters, and in downtimes where dialogue isn't happening, you can just listen to the diegetic sounds of the forest. With amazing sound design as well that makes you feel really immersed in the forest, as well as the voice actors killing their roles and having truly intense and realistic chemistry with each other. All of this comes together to give the game a really good presentation, and I really have no complaints with this aspect of the game. Hey guys, just here to tell you that if you've made it this far in the video and you've enjoyed it so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you never miss another upload. It's completely free and you can change your mind later. As well as, can you please hit the like button and comment down below whether you enjoyed the video or not. Firewatch is very much a story-centric game. The story is very important to Firewatch and its success. So how is Firewatch's story? Really good in the first half. Now, the first part of the story presents itself as Henry, the main character, struggling to cope with the fact that his wife has dementia and is slowly forgetting who he is. It takes a dive into the psychology of a man struggling with the person he loves being sick and not really seeing or talking to her. And this is amazing. It's a true masterpiece of a story that could have left a lasting impression on the player. There's this one moment early on, and it's really powerful, where Henry wakes up to hear his wife Julia speaking to him through the radio that you typically speak to Delilah through. And you have a whole conversation with her on how she's doing and how you're doing, only to later find out that it was all in Henry's mind. His subconscious made it up.
Hey, you big dumb idiot.
You're a big dumb idiot.
Oh, baby, you sound tired.
I am.
Are you having a nice time?
I don't know. There's some weird stuff going on.
Oh, that's too bad.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
back to sleep then.
Okay, Jules.
Delilah seems nice.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Bye, baby. Like 2 weeks ago, you called me in the middle of the night. You were sleeping, I guess, and all I heard was the name Jules through the mumbles.
Made it up as he struggles to cope with the fact that he left her with no contact to him. This moment is so powerful and really truly delves into the psychology and the struggles that Henry is going through with his mental health. And then there's Delilah, who, as mentioned, is Henry's supervisor. And really the only other important character in the game besides Henry, and one other we'll get into. And this is because you spend the entire day talking to her through the radios I mentioned earlier. And their friendship and relationship is a treat to watch. They're both really sarcastic with each other and bounce off of each other perfectly with this really nice chemistry towards them. There's another moment that I want to highlight though, and this is the conversation right before the big turn in the story we'll get into. The conversation takes place at night, as Henry and Delilah watch the forest fire that just started a few days ago. This fire would then later explode and cover the forest in smoke. And this conversation has some huge flirty undertones.
If I was there with you, I'm sure I would like it a lot.
Are you looking at the fire?
No, I'm looking at you.
Oh. Well, let me know when you are.
Okay, I'm looking at it again.
I love how they look at night. During the day, it's just smoke, but when the sun is down, you can just get lost.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here.
Why do you say that?
Because I do. I'm not crazy. I mean, we've had such a good time, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't talk to the other lookouts as much as I talk to you. Not in the same way. And I know you're not really available, but I want you to know, well, maybe it'd be nice to get together at the end of the summer. Look, we don't have to plan or even talk about it. I'm just having the thought. I wish I was over there.
I wish you were too.
We could sit outside. We could talk without these radios. We could, you know.
What? What could we do?
Well, let me tell you.
It seems to me that in this moment, Henry is slowly developing feelings for Delilah, and vice versa. This moment gave me goosebumps and left me astonished. And I really didn't know what to think about it, whether I liked it or didn't. On one hand, their interactions are great, and it's clear that they care about each other, and the voice actors did amazing work. But on the other hand, Henry is married. This moment seems to be setting up the player with a choice: stay with Julia or go with Delilah. A choice to make at the end of the game. That's what it felt like it was setting up. The first half of the game is absolutely amazing. It has rich characters and an amazing plot that puts the focus on Henry and his struggles to cope with the fact that his wife is sick and most likely won't remember him after the summer's end. I just wish they had kept going in this direction. The second half of Firewatch falls, and it is no graceful fall. The second half of the plot focuses on Delilah and Henry uncovering the fact that someone has been listening in on them. Through trying to solve it, they originally begin thinking that it was some government operation to study how two people behave in isolation, only to find out that it was some lost hiker who used to be a lookout in your tower, and then his son died in a supposed climbing accident and went into hiding. His name is Ned, and I hate his inclusion. He's the third important character I mentioned earlier. He's kind of a weird character, and his actions take the focus of the plot away from Henry and his struggle to be some unsolved mystery, and I absolutely despise it. Sure, the game always presents mysteries, but they never felt like the main focus of the game. kind of a subplot to keep it interesting. But Ned changes this. This all comes out of nowhere and caught me so off guard. I felt like the story made a complete 180 out of nowhere with no warning signs. Like the devs were unsure of the story they wanted to create and flipped it at the last second. But there's another big thing, and that's Ned's son, Brian. He's first mentioned when you find a bunch of useful gear in his backpack, a bunch of gear that could have been in one of the cash boxes. Delilah mentions that Brian and Ned kinda had a strange relationship while they were stationed in your tower. And it's implied that Ned faked the climbing accident and killed his kid when you find his body, and with the following conversation with Delilah. And I genuinely don't know if he did or didn't. The game doesn't provide enough evidence for me to truly fall in either of the sides, but I'm leaning more towards he did, because that's what the game settles on within the ending.
So, taking stock, we found out an old lookout killed his only son and decided to become a lonely hermit.
Yes.
The second half of Firewatch's story feels like a different game. The game doesn't give you the time to adjust to its new story, and it's just a worse story. It pains me to say that the game's latter half is genuinely bad in the story department. It completely abandons Henry's character development, and the player then has to assume that it just happened off screen, and character development shouldn't happen off screen. The second half of the story in this game is so bad that if I were to do a second playthrough, I'm pretty sure I'd quit halfway through before the conspiracy plot. Now, not only does the latter half of the story suck, there's one moment that seems kind of weird to me. In the beginning of the game, there are these girls skinny dipping and lighting fireworks. It's literally in the first level. You tell them off and you go on your way. Within the second day, you later find out they chopped the power lines, or it's implied that it might have been Ned who did it. I don't know, man. And then later on, they go missing. They're like, nobody finds them, and you're the last who had spoken with them.
Young women, Chelsea Stevens and Lily McLean, were reported missing. They've got parents out in California who haven't heard from them in a week.
Which is such an interesting subplot to add in on top of Henry's mental issues. But they don't do anything with it. In the later half of the story, after the conspiracy things, they explain it in a tiny dialogue section that they got drunk, stole a farmer's tractor, and went to jail.
Also, those girls turned up. Looks like you didn't kill them. Nobody did. They took some farmer's tractor for a joyride down in Riverton and, landed in jail.
This is just such a missed opportunity, and it hurts to see such a solid part get a finish like this. And that goes for the entire story, to see such a good foundation be left in rubble. It's just so weird, and I can't fathom the direction they chose to take. It feels like they had more planned. A better story planned, but couldn't fulfill it, or changed their mind midway through. Another thing, the game has one ending. I kinda mentioned it before, but it gives you choices that can branch out into different dialogue paths, but they all meet at the one ending. Like, I genuinely question how a game about a mascot dog that comes out of a video game to come and kill you as a child has more endings than Firewatch. It genuinely confuses me. It is so sad for the game to have taken a turn like this. Truly it is. But I mentioned there being a fatal flaw in Firewatch, and I wanted to revisit what this fatal flaw is. What do I think it is? Missed potential. This game, in so many sections, had so much potential, but it was never realized, especially in the story. I've sat here thinking about how in some other timeline, this game could have had a rich story about a man coping with his wife's dementia diagnosis, testing the player's morality by giving them two endings. One where you stay with Julia for the rest of her days, and one where you leave to go off with Delilah and follow that blossoming love, as scummy as that is. But that isn't what we got. Instead, we got the foundation for that. A beautiful, well-crafted foundation and then it was smashed into rubble. With a weird conspiracy plot that includes a crazy dad and his dead son that maybe he killed, maybe he didn't? Ever since I finished Firewatch, there's been a part of me that's felt a little empty, craving for a version with a deep story that tugged on the heartstrings and could have rivaled that of something like Detroit Become Human, made the player ask themselves who they really are and make difficult choices, and then go on to question the choices they made along the way. But that's not what happened. That is Firewatch's fatal flaw.